I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to Mark's Adventures War for the Crown, Part 4 or 5. As usual, there are major spoilers for War for the Crown in Mark's Adventures War for the Crown. And so, please, you need to stop watching now if you would be spoiled by Book 5, The Reaper's Right Hand, or beyond. Since, yes, there's a lot of things coming on. Alright. And Elftro, who would be spoiled, is muting things, but will still be with us in thoughts. Thanks, Elftro.
Thanks, Elftro.
Alright. So, if you remember, everyone, what happened at the end of last time, the group had just defeated, in a verbal duel, General Pytharius, convincing him to step down where he was exiled, and, to a tidy retirement in Absalom. And after that, though, after they convinced him to step down, he was like, "You don't know what you've unleashed. I've been stopping this information from getting out, but now contingencies will come into place. The Stavian line are actually a renamed version of the Adelas, which are sort of Taldor's version of being like, oh, yeah, you know, your character's last name is actually Hitler, or something like that. They were just, like, the most hated family in all of Taldan history, and Taldor has a long history. It's way longer than any empire's history should be,
Yes.
in a reasonable history. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So, that is really bad news for Eutropia, because of the fact that instead of consolidating her last actual rival, Pytharius, and then winning the war for the crown, everything splinters off and everybody else is like, wow, they're really Adelas who were just adopted and are, the most hated family. My family has a better claim than the Stavians did altogether, whether or not Eutropia is the correct follower-up to Stavian III. That doesn't matter, because my family did this and such with this other emperor. And so, suddenly, they're back to having more factions than ever before. At that point, like, pretty much all the Grand Dukes and Duchesses, except for, like, 2 or 3 of them, just had their own claim, and a bunch of other people, some of which are never explained, like Vort, the person who just always has a small amount of land and almost never expands.
Well, I mean, that did answer the question for us of, like, why does it seem like we're about to win this war for the crown and there's still 2 more books?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why it seemed like you were about to win this war for the crown and there were still 2 more books. Is that there are 2 more books.
Yes.
Also, in this in-between time, when people are doing their persona phases and such, is when an alchemist from Niv's organization, the Immaculate Circle, named Nenarine, comes to visit him and tells him that there might be an opening soon in the Inner Circle because they were disappointed in one of their members. And
Nenarine Adela, huh?
Nenarine. Yes, her last name might be Adela, but the Adela family line has gone extinct, so not a great idea to go by that name.
Yep.
So, yeah, she offered him some of her own research, which only works on her because of her unique biology. And told him that he's close with his research, and that with these notes that he might be even closer to achieving immortality, which is the ultimate infinite loop exploit. And since Niv is trying to playtest the game and exploit the rules, he was eager to complete his exploit. So he continued on his research, hoping to join the inner circle of the Immaculate Circle soon.
Why don't we do a quick recap of who the PCs are? Because you just threw Niv out there.
I threw Niv out there. So the PCs, if you don't remember or have just joined now, let's go through very quickly.
All right. Carla Vinmark.
Carla Vinmark is a at this point, I think she's a sorcerer
/ champion of Felena.
/ champion of Felena, but she's about to turn back into a bard, like, sometime during Part 5. Her main class has changed, but she's always multi-classed Redeemer of Felena.
Eustace Lothied. His last name has been very relevant at many times throughout this adventure.
That's true. Vinmark is also a last name that matters because of the fact that one of the members of the Vinmarks, Carla's uncle, was exalted by Stavian III during the time that Stavian III was mourning, and is sort of like the mayor of Opara. But Eustace Lothied is a cousin of the other Lothieds in the Adventure Path. He's a wizard, and he is chaotic and wants to take his family and other obnoxious nobles down for the peasantry.
For her Iron Temper, my PC, Dwarven, Artistic, Armorsmith, and Fighter. John the Marksman, who is he still a marksman at this point?
No, he switched to, his name is John the Marksman because of his archery feats, but he has actually switched to being, using a short sword and then a whip, with a shield, with a disruptive stance where he doesn't really care about doing damage, but his main thing is he's going to follow people around and disrupt their spellcasting.
Professional, endgame professional athlete, and
creepy stalker.
Creepy stalker, and person who really enjoys looking at a lot of different unusual builds.
Yep. That's out of game.
Out of
but
game,
he's
yes.
not he's not out of game with creepy stalker.
That's
In game, he's a creepy stalker who stealths around, finds people's secrets, and blackmails them.
Yes.
Okay.
Niv, we've just been talking about.
Yes, Niv,
Alchemist.
an alchemist, member of the Immaculate Circle.
Quingle,
who is a gnomish cleric of Desna. And then
T,
who is a Tian rogue.
Yes. When she and her player is her player often has to like come in a little bit later, other things like that. So and sometimes misses sessions. So the meme is that
once she got legendary sneak.
Well, I mean, it was kind of a meme anyway. When she got
Sure.
legendary sneak, it really was sort of just like anytime that. Whenever her player comes in, like, it's like, oh yeah, and T was also there, and it's her turn, and then she's in perfect positioning, and then she attacks.
Alright. That's true.
Yep.
She's also a peasant who was a friend of Eustace when they were little, and both of their parents were killed by Ellers, a Sakiel, who was in service to Panavar Lothied the Sixth, who was also all of the Panavars.
Yep.
Alright. So, basically, the alchemist is doing his research, and also Nenarine tells him that right now, the Immaculate Circle is neutral in political affairs, and was not like pro Pytharius, certainly not pro Eutropia, but it is they don't like the fact that this is splintered off into a whole bunch of different people, and just everybody is fighting, and that they appreciate his efforts that he's doing to make sure that the Stavian line sort of gets back to being not hated by everybody, mainly because, well, the Immaculate Circle is backing Carius Stavian for the throne, but she doesn't necessarily mention that. So moving on into Book 5, the PCs are starting off, they're trying to find the mantle of Taldaris. Taldaris, the first emperor of Taldor, is like everything that every Taldan remembers is he's awesome, he's the best, he's the greatest.
So anything that looks like Taldaris' approval is something that will make people like, oh, well, if Taldaris approves, then it must be okay.
But his mantle has been lost because emperors who themselves were worried that Taldaris wouldn't approve them because they were like kind of one who was kind of sketchy, just sort of conveniently lost it in a mausoleum so that people would not use it to test whether or not that emperor was considered okay by Taldaris. Up till that point, people had used a ritual with this mantle that allowed Taldaris to say who Taldaris thought
And no
was
one got suspicious when he just happened to lose the mantle. Oops, I guess we can't ask Taldaris, but Taldaris would have said I'm totes legit.
Yep. That's about right. So, and the PCs were hanging out before this point with Carius, and Frogry was sparring with him, and he was using, like, some dueling techniques from Emperor Guineris' time that were really cool. And then Gloriana Marilla of the Pathfinder Society appeared. Oh yeah, that was the point in time where the text, like, hopped between whether or not you guys were in Opara or were in the Palace of Birdsong.
Yeah.
So, whichever one that you actually wound up being in, Gloriana Marilla had a plan, which is to go find the Mantle of Kings by approximating the location of the tomb of the first emperor where it had been interred. Because that other emperor, his conveniently losing it there was also, like, it's disrespectful to Taldaris for us to be constantly parading on his mantle, so putting it in
put
the
it back
tomb,
in his tomb.
and
So it wasn't
then
actually
kind of
losing it.
forgetting it in the tomb conveniently.
Yes.
And then it actually did become lost to time because other emperors didn't want to go get it in the tomb. And so they had to head over to Piltzhaven.
And that was two millennia ago because
Taldaris' history is so long.
Yep.
So they wanted to head over to Piltzhaven, but before they did, the PCs decided that since the Piltzhaven area would be under the control of Calbio of Breezy Creek, if he was alive, that it would make their life easier if Calbio was alive at this point in time. So they brought him back from the dead, and he's very low level, so it was
and
very
we gave
inexpensive.
Calbio his letter because the AP kind of assumed that we had read early on because we didn't want to read a dead person's mail.
Yes, the PCs had not read the letter up till that point.
Yeah.
The AP assumed that they read the letter and felt terrible and possibly paid to have him raised before this, but the PCs had just held on to the letter. And they raised him now when it was politically expedient, and they gave him the letter. And so with Calbio, they headed back to the Piltzhaven area, where they found out that during the War for the Crown, one of the few battles had killed off the local Landgrave. And so a mean old Viscount, Yemis Avenlar, had taken over control of the area, just like, oh, I'm just helping out, because the local Baron and the Landgrave perished. But he was definitely messing things up. So the PCs had restored Calbio to life, and it says in the AP that you don't get to do the little minigame if you restore Calbio to life, because you have Calbio and PCs have no difficulty slapping the Viscount on the wrist. But I decided that the PCs would have more fun if they did do some Persona phases, so I just didn't charge the PCs for those Persona phases against what else was going on, because normally it's one of these things where it's like the PCs doing Persona phases now changes the speed of an election in a different plane, which sort of makes sense because you took another week, but
yeah.
I just didn't do that. And
yeah, so you basically just gave us some free Persona phases so we could still do the thing.
Yep. And the PCs completely screwed over the Viscount. Especially John managed to get some major blackmail with some critical successes from his agents on the operations. And at that point, it was very easy to force the Viscount aside and allow Calbio to take control of the area. And so at that...
And we paid off his parents' debts.
Yes, they also paid off his parents' debts. So at that point, the PCs were able to easily find the tomb of Taldaris, the first emperor. And so they decided to head into the tomb. And it's definitely possible to get into some fights in that tomb, but the PCs pretty much did not. So they went in. There were traps, which they kind of found. Also, Froggery was just...
There is so much art.
There is almost a concerning amount of description of the exact details of the art and the archaeology in the adventure, which was perfect for Linda's character,
yes.
Froggery, who is an art fanatic, because I even over embellished what was already very, very detailed by talking about like the different art movements that Taldor went through over the millennia and which ones were represented, because it talked about like later artists coming in to sort of do their own interpretations over faded
I see now
art.
In the actual AP, which I'm seeing for the first time as we were going through this, it was a knowledge DC 20 knowledge history check. I was using like super high lore art scene.
Also, I don't use
I know you don't use
DCs.
I know you don't use first edition DCs. You use appropriate DCs for second edition.
That was a DC. Oh, you don't have knowledge history, so I'll make it easy. So you have it, you get it. Knowledge history check. But yes, and there was all sorts of art, and I think some of the things like Taldor's third artistic renaissance are definitely in there, and I just like played it up. And Froggery was just decided to take penalties to most initiative because she was studying the art, except for when the statues attacked. Then I was like, you can use your art scene for your initiative, and you don't take a penalty because the art you were studying is what attacked. Actually, they did get into one fight.
Yeah, we did.
Which is the crypt guards that are there to destroy undead in the antechamber. You pretty much can't ignore or avoid. You have to go into A2, and they attack you when you go into A2. But other than that, there are a lot of rooms where you could get attacked, and they managed to have T disable the traps. They managed to not get into a fight with the Clockwork Angel in Area A6.
What would have got us into that fight? Trying to steal stuff?
I think so. Let me see what happens that caused it to tap. Oh, I see. What happens is it goes through the motions of showing off the room to visitors. After 5 minutes of this routine, its programming takes over and it attacks. But you guys did not stay. When it started doing that, the other people were like, come on, we still have stuff to do. There was like a spell that was up, and then and the frog was like, I want to stay and listen, and then nobody let you.
Yep.
And so you did not get attacked by the Clockwork Angel. And then in the public tomb, the big, large tomb that was leading down there with the giant gold statue of Taldaris.
That one is the attacks if you loot.
In self-defense or if you loot any of the treasures.
Yes.
Then there was a sequestered shop tea trap that happened in the room with all the little shop teas. If you try to take any of the, let me see. Oh no, that was on the stairs. The one that you guys stopped that would turn you into a little shop tea in the shop tea area. So then they headed downstairs into the shop tea room with the Gallery of Lions.
And the Gallery of Lions, which has the food lions in it.
Yes, they found Lucaro and Mirlial, the advanced food dire lions, who have each have their own personalities, and started discussing things with the PCs, who did not seem overtly villainous and were not trying to steal things and were clearly very diplomatic PCs who were interested in history and art. And so the PCs got into a conversation with the Foo Lions. They did not fight them. I
think Ferg refused to move on for a little while, and the rest of the PCs
she just kept talking to them about the art. While they literally did the rest of the dungeon without her at this time. Let's see. And then there's the Usopp teas, which they will begin fighting when a creature moves any of their respective statues, if they do not bear the holy symbol of Abadar Pharasma. But at that point in time, everyone had the holy symbol of Pharasma because of a previous trap that they identified that had a holy symbol of Pharasma, and they did not move any of the respective statues. So they continued not fighting anything except those initial guardians. And they managed to not be hit by the celestial lore trap that pulled them into the blade barrier ceiling with reverse gravity. And made it into the inner tomb without Frogger, who was still discussing art. Which is where they ran into the Valkyrie Ohalia, one of the previous generals from Taldaris' time. So Ohalia was a little bit concerned about the fact that the PCs looked like they were looters coming in here for the mantle of Taldaris, since they had not looked around quite everywhere for the mantle and instead like cracked open the sarcophagus thinking maybe it was in there, which it was not. She and her Einherjar came in, and the PCs managed to mostly talk her down except John, who insulted her. And so she forced John to fight with her. And eventually she defeated John in the fight. I think it was either she fought him or maybe it was one of her Einherjar.
I think she sent one of her Einherjar.
Yeah, and Einherjar defeated John, and at which point she determined that John must be a powerful hero due to the fact that her Choose the Slain ability was working while he was dying. And she could have chosen him. So she then told the PCs they could heal John and said that his loss, which proved that he was more heroic than his words appeared. So at that point, they had befriended the Valkyrie Ohalia. It was very chaotic because she is literally a monitor of chaos, and who also came here to figure out what happened to Taldaris because something had happened to him. So the PCs with Klingel as the primary spellcaster attempted the Taldaris ritual, but when they did, instead of actually meeting with Taldaris' spirit and gaining bonuses on things and his blessing on their relics and saying which emperor is the best, the lights dimmed and faded into darkness, obscuring the tomb as the faint sound of plate armor shifting clacked nearby, followed by a deep voice whispering, "A visitor. I do not know how you are here, but it is not safe. You can do no good here, only attract harm." And then this long scene that the PCs... It had a lot of clues in it that the PCs kept forgetting and then paying someone in access to refresh their memory.
Yeah, but it was like very poetic and long, and you said it too quickly for me to type it all down. So you sort of simulated things by like as fast as I could type stuff. That's what we actually got to keep.
Yep.
From each time we went back to that.
When the PCs' visions ended, they were in a house. It turns out. And that was weird. And then they realized they were on the plane of Axis when the chaotic people were like, "Yeah, this plane's very lawful." Unfortunately, while it did bring them to Taldaris' house, he is not home.
Aw, he wasn't home.
That's right.
Could
But
something terrible have happened?
The PCs still managed to get into a fight with an advanced clockwork golem that had, like, symbols of the city guard of Axis. And then they got into a fight with some advanced soul eaters who they thought were Bishagasukus. And Bishagasukus are actually so similar to soul eaters that despite the fact that they quickly failed, and I told them it was a Bishagasuku, they never found out it wasn't a Bishagasuku. They just didn't use cold, which, like, Bishagasuku are basically soul eaters except they're cold.
Yes. So we just didn't use cold.
Yep. I never realized that the two creatures were that similar. And they combined the two groups of soul eaters, so they fought all of those together. And after that, looks like my other computer
Just shut down.
gave out, but we can still get the PDF.
One moment,
on
please.
Here. Whoops. It's been having to work more than usual.
It usually doesn't give out when it's. It usually doesn't give out when it's been up for a while, but.
Yeah, usually not.
Well, if we have to switch you over to your computer,
it's been doing okay for months, but
okay.
Having it turn off once is very unlikely to mean that we have to switch over to that.
Okay. So, have any of you guys played through War for the Crown?
While we get the file back up. Also, I actually remember what happens next, so I could
you can start.
I can still say what happens.
Yeah.
So, basically, the next thing that happens is they went upstairs to the library in the building, which has a bunch of traps on the stairs, and then an absolutely enormous number of ward traps that the druidic worm that walks has dropped in a straight path towards reaching where she is. So John, who's normally like a little bit craven, just a little bit, for some reason decides that despite the fact that there might be some traps, there's one trap that he saw, he's going to approach in a straight line path towards the worm because she's clearly a spellcaster and he wants to disrupt her spells. So he triggers the first trap. He actually does have some of the abilities to let him, that will allow him to sort of use his shield to block against the fire damage of some of these explosive traps, which is good. But then he triggers a second trap, and he triggers a third trap,
and he keeps going.
A fourth trap, a fifth trap. He's like, how many traps are there? But he actually gets up there into the worm's face after 5 traps. He's ridiculously low. He smacks her.
Didn't he get like a bonus on his intimidation check or something? Because he was.
No, what happened was Eustace's player said, I can't believe I'm about to say this, but I think you should give John a hero point.
Oh, that's what happened.
And I was like, you're right. That was actually really heroic. And he managed to disrupt her spells. Quingle wound up flame striking some of the library. And they splorched her into lots of little worms.
Well, he wasn't directly flame striking. He was flame striking the area, which also hit the library. It wasn't like, I'm just going to flame strike the books. He managed to flame strike the library.
Yeah. Splorched her into a ton of little worms, which wriggled away. So, at that point, what happens is that the PCs had a little time to collect themselves, but not very long before the house was surrounded by guards. And the guards...
That's how you spell Lieutenant Finalex.
Finalex, yes.
That was totally not how I was spelling in my head.
That's okay, Linda. Lieutenant Finalex, who basically tells the PCs in Utopian that they're coming in. And the PCs immediately surrender to the guard and explain what happened. And they're eventually charged with a small fine for blowing up some of the books. That Quingle is fined for being a chaotic Desna priest who blew up a bunch of the library of the house.
Mm-hmm.
But everything else is blamed on the worm and the soul eaters. And the PCs managed to, not only do they clear their names, but they convince Lieutenant Finalex that something bad is going on and that they need to get a visa that will allow them to investigate as independent investigators. And they also get a visitor visa and a work visa just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Halia
refuses to get those other visas because she's a chaotic Valkyrie.
Mm-hmm. One visa was enough for her.
Yes. So she was already grumbling about having to sign one lawful visa.
Mm-hmm.
So the PCs get this additional visa, and they wait in all these lines, and I role-played some extra stuff that wasn't in here about, like, paperwork and these different axiomites and all the different procedures that they put the PCs through in order to or to test to make sure that that they can have these visas, and so they get all the visas that they need.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, the PCs decide to go investigate, and Ohalia stays to work together with Phenalix begrudgingly on some additional leads. So the PCs now have several clues, not all of the clues because of the fact that they haven't yet quite poked their memory, but they do have enough to know that that there are some things that they need to investigate, such as they notice the existence of the Shinigami,
Mm-hmm.
who they're trying to find. They also realized that there was something going on in the astral plane, and they did not quite figure out about the importance of the ring yet that they would eventually deal with later on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was...
Do we know about how the election can help
the
us
graves. They wanted to check the graves.
yet? Yeah.
And also, Phenalix told the PCs that that there was something suspicious that happened with the previous Counselor of Gates, and that they would, if they won the election
Mm-hmm.
and became the Counselor of Gates, that would help the investigation. So, let's see. The Real Unicorn asked, did you run many influence-based social encounters for these interactions, or just roleplay it? So, we definitely ran influence-based subsystems and verbal duels whenever the AP called for them.
Mm-hmm.
Or also just mini encounters where, like with Ohalia, everyone tried to impress her, and only John did not.
Yeah. That was more just like a who succeeds on the check as opposed to like a full-on influence.
But whenever there is one in the AP, we ran the whole thing through. So like at the Senate and in several other places at the Jubilee. Also in this one, there is a different long-term, I guess we would call it midterm in the Game Mastery Guide because it takes place over the entire book. Mini game about an election, because one of the PCs, in this case Froggery, because nobody else was lawful, and being lawful seemed like an advantage, it is engaging in an election against the Medusa candidate Sebani, who the enemies are backing because of the fact that they have leverage with the Medusa, who is herself not evil. She's lawful neutral, but they have leverage with her, and they don't want the PCs to win. So in the election minigame, the PCs are just generally grabbing some new persona characters, or plane shifting the other agents with them over into this plane, and they're politicking. You get different bonuses for each of the side quests you do, and otherwise they can stump for positive statements about Froggery. They can also spread horrible, slanderous attack ads against the Medusa.
Which John totally spread racist attack ads, and then when Froggery found out that was going on,
like, it's a Medusa. Can you really trust them? They're usually evil.
Yeah, and Froggery's like, cut it out, and then he went and did something else, and we had no idea what he was doing during his phases. And then
that's right.
He came eventually. He came back and to have a conversation about it. And then the question was, I think you asked me, like, what do you think that John's looking for here? And then I know that character well, so it's like, he's looking for my character to apologize for not recognizing the greatness of his assistance, and that's never gonna...
That's correct.
Yep.
He wanted Froggery to apologize.
Yep.
And so, yeah, you can do that, God. And then the last thing you can do is that there are 6 sort of different lanes of the election, and each one corresponds to one of the persona qualities. So you can also canvas one of them to figure out basically who's ahead, and possibly a good sense of how much who's ahead by. And that also takes one of your phases to do that. and you can do different things with different kinds of agents. So you can stump for a specific aspect with agents of that aspect. Certain sneaky agents like the charm and the subterfuge agents are the ones who can spread horrible rumors about any of the six, and then the intelligence and the sagacity and the genius agents are the ones who do canvassing and try to figure out how things are going. So the PCs thought that they were going to win this election by virtue of like giving up on a few aspects so that they could really, because you win if you have 4 of the 6 under your control, and they figured that they could divert all of their effort into 4 of them in a way that forces the Medusa to really waste her time, and they would get a sort of, they called it gerrymandering their stuff.
Yes.
As it turns out, they really completely ineffectually gerrymandered their things as about as inefficiently as they possibly could against the Medusa. They still won.
Well, because the Medusa also was noticing what we were ignoring, and then she didn't invest resources.
And her friends, the bad guys, also were noticing what the pieces were ignoring and told the Medusa.
Yes.
And so they wound up anti-gerrymandering themselves, but the PCs still won in the end because they did so well at this mini game. And I gave the Medusa more advancements because of the fact that PCs had huge numbers of PCs.
Yes.
But even when John stopped actually helping the PCs, they still easily won it. I think that they won 4 out of 6 just handily.
So what was he actually doing during that time?
Mostly just building up his persona agents back to maximum and raising his facets.
Okay.
He wasn't doing anything nefarious.
See, I just assumed he was doing something nefarious in the background, like gathering blackmail on the PCs or something.
No. He just figured he'd help himself if nobody wanted his help.
Fair enough.
Alright, so that was going on sort of in the background of all these other mini-games. So, let's see, there's a question here from Wither King. Fun fact, I saw a campaign of War for the Crown, and I was all for the Medusa becoming a diplomat.
We almost had our way till the paladin questioned the snakes.
That's hilarious.
That's nice.
That's great.
There, then of course, that sounds like a fun way to help the players have stakes in more of the book.
Yep. Absolutely. So, is that the power cord going out?
Yep.
Alright.
I just popped it back in.
So, the PCs, I think one of the first things they did was check the graves to see if there was any indication in the, so it's not exactly a graveyard. It is, the name of it, it's going to be on there now that I can't use my computer. The Hall of Final Deeds. It's where petitioners go to have counseling when they are on the edge of sort of melding with the plane and becoming part of its quintessence. And so the PCs went there and they talked to Eifault C, who is an arbiter, inevitable type of Aeon that lives in that area, and is a counselor, not like CILOR, like the counselor of gates that you're voting for, but SELOR.
Eifault's so cute because Eifault has one giant purple wooby eye that's like takes up a large portion of their body.
Yep, and also I think there's somebody there when you guys showed up.
Wasn't there a counselor who was praying?
Yeah, one of the other counselors was there and was praying, and the PCs talked to that counselor.
And we prayed with him too.
And prayed with him too. Yeah, that's right. Yes, it was Jolmuk, the counselor of graves.
Yes.
And this improved your public image because you did that. And they didn't really find any actual clues there, though. So at that point, the PCs decided to back up, get a little bit better of a sense of what was going on, and try to find the weird Shinigami that they saw in the vision, the skeleton with wings. And they eventually did find him in a Yash shop that they had actually gone to before, and he was there before they were even done any of this and thought about finding the clues.
So what's Yasht?
Yasht is a special type of drink that's sort of like the coffee of this particular area, Sayashto, which is one of the districts of one of the sectors of Axis.
And that's where we were trying to become the Counselor of Gates.
That's right.
Have my character become
Frogry
the
Iron Templar, Counselor of Gates of Sayashto.
Yes.
So Yasht is like their like coffee-ish drink of the area that's made of a gourd that they have a ton of that gourd. So, let's see. Were we gonna go
Yes.
back to the file? I know that we also have to switch so we can see what chat is saying. So they decide to have a drink of Yasht with Karit, the Shinigami, and the Shinigami talks to them about meeting Taldaris, first hearing that there was this invincible warlord who just was winning and winning every time, and then found out Taldaris was really a philosopher, and they got along. And the PCs answer a lot of weird, piercing questions from Karit, and eventually, after they impressed him, what did he give you guys again? Like, was it the flower that he kept from Taldaris that you might be able to use to help with your divinations?
A memento, his memento of Taldaris.
Yeah, I think it's a flower that was his memento of Taldaris. And also, since you guys were seen conversing with such an impressive figure, it was good for politics that you did that. So after that, the PCs were trying to figure out what happened on the astral plane, because clearly something was happening there. And they managed to narrow it down to trying to figure out that some crackpot theories from this astronomer named Karit, because you can actually do astral plane astronomy in Axis, because it's just like up in the air.
Well, Karit is the Shinigami.
What? Oh no, Karit is the Shinigami.
Yeah.
So
Nabil.
Nabil. So it's just mislabeled in the AP because
no, it's one page up.
What?
That's the Shinigami.
That's the Shinigami. That doesn't look like a Shinigami.
That's the Shinigami.
Karit is the name of the Shinigami, but that art is not.
Anyway.
Is not a Shinigami.
Okay, so that was mislabeled then.
All right.
Anyway.
So there is a soulbound doll of an astronomer named Nabil. That actually kind of looks like a petitioner. But anyway, this astronomer, because you can be an astronomer of the astral plane in Axis, because it's just sort of visible up there, and Pharasma Spire is just coming up through the middle, noticed that some constellations were really messed up. And after that has been suddenly, not only was his work quashed by like threatening letters, but also Inevitables have been alerted that soulbound dolls may be a way of trying to become immortal, even though this doll did not choose to be a soulbound doll. And so ridiculously powerful Inevitables were sent after this soulbound doll. Now, while they were talking with Karit, Carla tried to read a threatening letter that had a seal that was very similar to something they saw in the vision on it, which caused it to erase all of Carla's memories for like the past day.
Wasn't it the past week?
Past week.
It was
they
the past
erased
week.
all
It was
of
a lot
Carla's
of
memories
time.
for the past week. And then, before the PCs could really explain much, an Inevitable was on its way. And so they hid the soulbound doll, and then Carla, who the PCs told her some things, but not that they had Karit there, Carla was able to get past a certain lies due to the fact that she just legitimately didn't know that they had a fugitive that this Inevitable was looking for.
And that was like, oh yeah, this
so Inevitable was like, have you seen this soulbound doll? I was like, no, I've never seen the soulbound doll, and I don't know what's going on, and no.
Yep.
Like, oh, it must have been a mistake.
And the rest of us were like, yes, the mind wipe champion. Yes, please testify that you've never seen any of this stuff, and we'll just stand back here.
They didn't want this soulbound doll to get killed just because some sketchy people were threatening the soulbound doll. So eventually they decided that it was a good idea to plane shift onto the astral plane with the soulbound doll and go do some astronomy together. So they headed into the astral plane, and they headed out to the Legend of Taldaris, which is one of the constellations that was having some issues. Where they found that, yes, some of the essence of Emperor Taldaris had definitely been disrupted by someone who came in and picked out some of it. Some of it was just loose and easily accessible, so Niv took it for his immortality thing, because why not? I mean, it was right there. But also an Astrodaemon was there and decided to try to get revenge on the PCs on behalf of the surviving Sister of Indulgent Dreams, due to the fact that the PCs had
You mean
killed.
the surviving div, who was totally a div?
Yeah, she's definitely not a night hag. Who was grabbing different things on the astral plane.
Critical failures.
Yep. So, I mean, this series is why Linda found out that she was not a div.
Yes. I just thought she was some kind of div.
So that Astrodaemon was one of the closest times, other than the ooze from the earlier episode, that anyone came to dying.
That Astrodaemon was scary.
Because it focus fired Quingle. And if he had not had temporary hit points from an Aeon Stone, he would have died.
Mm-hmm.
That he did. So he came within, with his doom and all those other things, he came within like 2 hit points of being dead.
Yes.
And he wasn't. So that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
They took out the Astrodaemon, and it was an elite Astrodaemon.
Yes.
And then they examined Taldaris' astral legend to learn more information. And tales of the PCs going to the astral plane and fighting an Astrodaemon to protect the legend made them popular. So that was handy. So the PCs wanted to get even more leads, so they went back and refreshed their memories again.
Well, also, we actually didn't primarily go just for that. We also went because we were trying to figure out how to get back Carla's memory for the last week. And that was why we sought out someone who could help us with memories in the first place.
And that's when they realized also that there were some other issues. They went to talk to the previous Counselor of Gates and found out he had definitely been blackmailed, and also with a similar kind of letter. Mm-hmm. And that he wasn't going to get into anything openly because they threatened his friends and family. Mm-hmm. So, but that he wanted the PCs to win because the Medusa was a problem. Mm-hmm. Not because she was terrible.
Her,
he
but
was
because
like,
she's under the
not
influence,
bad, but she's being influenced by them too because he saw one of those same letters to her. He doesn't know exactly how she's being influenced, but she is. Mm-hmm. So the PCs then decided, let's check the mail. Maybe we can trace it back.
Yes.
So,
but didn't we do the memory? We guess we didn't do the memory fixing stuff just yet.
You did.
We did.
So they did the memory fixing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it didn't.
But because I remember the memory fixing thing was just like, wow, this is some super powerful magic, and I thought we got a little bit of a glimpse of what may have been behind it when we did that. No.
Nope.
Okay.
It just said it was really strong.
Okay. Cool.
So they did the memory fixing thing. It didn't actually fix all of Carla's memories.
I know what this was. This was when I figured out what was happening.
Oh, yeah. Linda figured out what was happening because she was working on a Seeker level
adventure that had a very similar
for Pathfinder Society First Edition, and she's like, this sounds really like a creature that's in there, and it was.
Yeah.
But you guys didn't figure that out.
Yes, not in character.
That's when you went to check the mail, and you guys went into the mail office, and there were all sorts of paperwork and clerks, and they let you go and check the letters, and eventually, after a long time of questioning clerks and checking the letters and figuring out that, hey, there weren't any yellow letters when they were being sorted, but the delivery people with their bags said that they definitely were some letters with those yellow seals, that it must have been inserted at a particular time, so they went to check with a particular one of the mail inspectors, I think, or there's some kind of title. Let's see.
But the mail inspector was the role.
I think it may have postmaster. The title was postmaster. The postmaster was in charge during that time, and the postmaster was dead. So that was strange. Also, a dragon post courier who the party had seen flying around sometimes before.
The Vortex Dragon.
Vortex Dragon had been seen leaving the scene. So the PCs didn't know about that, but they did try to go to the house of this dead postmaster just in case. And they heard rumors that there was a dragon heading in that direction too. And they eventually found that the dragon was destroying evidence.
Yes.
And so the PCs attacked the dragon.
And spent time trying to protect the evidence.
Spent a little time saving the evidence and saved some of the evidence. And managed to defeat the dragon, after which out of its brain popped a brain assassin, intellect devourer, which the PCs fought that assassin off until eventually it teleported away. With fifth level dimension door.
Leaving behind the evidence that we had managed to save.
That's right. So the PCs took that evidence, and it also, it helped the take necessary steps. Let's see. Did you resolve the? Yeah, there were certain things that you guys would have been able to use to try to discredit the Medusa more that I think you did not use because of the fact that
we chose because I didn't want to specifically make her look bad. We felt like that was a bit too underhanded.
All right, so finally the PCs decided to go after Taldaris' ring just in case.
Dastardly dragon.
Yes, it wasn't really a dastardly dragon.
Really, of course, why would you agree to travel in the astral plane with a soulbound doll? It sounds like my worst nightmare. Well. There will be more fear-based things in the future for this party.
Oh boy. So the PCs wanted to find Taldaris' ring, which they found out that he had given to a very important position called Lord Squire. The Lord Squire lives in this giant tower, and the Lord Squire is the leader of the Order of Eves. Which actually means that Lord Squire is the most powerful, awakened, resolute Tamarin monkey. Cleric of Abadar.
Yes.
And Taldaris liked those monkeys and gave them his special ring. So they went to talk to the monkeys, who said they would be happy to give the ring to the party to help find Taldaris, who was their buddy. Except that it had been stolen from these resolute monkeys.
Oh gosh, here we go.
By the Crown Top Coup, which is a group of it's a hive mind swarm of awakened intelligence cockatiels.
Yes.
Who stole this ring.
Yes. All right, go ahead and do your voice.
And so the PCs decided that they needed to get this back from the cockatiels. And so they tried to reason with the cockatiels, and the cockatiels had the following voice: "You stupid monkeys! We will kill you. We will chase you off and taunt you a second time." So it was basically high pitched version of the Monty Python
impression. And we had a 15-minute conversation with them, and which was peppered with some out of character things. Where it's like, we shouldn't attack them just because they're really annoying.
You're the ones who are annoying, you stupid monkeys!
For 15 minutes. Yeah.
And then
it was really,
the PCs
really
tried to claim that they were more intelligent than the cockatiels, but the cockatiels actually have +6 int.
Yes.
So Froggy's I bet you don't even know how to temper to temper things.
Well, that was also to try to figure out what is the...
She's what's the melting temperature of metal? She's what do you mean metal? That is stupid, you monkey. Each metal has its own melting temperature.
So Mikey says, was there discussion of attacking Mark for doing that voice for 15 minutes? No.
And then they rattled off exact melting temperatures of different metals. It depends on the nickel content.
Well, that was because of the because of a potential plan to trick them by making a cheap fake ring to exchange, and then we discovered that would not work because they actually knew what they were talking about.
That's right. So, but what the PCs actually eventually did was that they found out that the leader of the hive mind was wearing it as a crown. So they basically made up a fake about a third group of intelligent animals that were a group of intelligent bats.
Yes.
That were coming in and that were led by some kind of masked vigilante that wears a bat outfit.
Yes.
And
a Batman, if you will.
Yes, a Batman, if you will. And that the Batman and the intelligent bats were going to do something. And then at that point, the PCs I think they made an illusion of a giant bat swarm, and then T used Coco the Bat to turn into a bat.
Mm-hmm.
And while the bat swarm was distracting the Crown Top Coup, T flew in and stole the ring as one of the bats, and then the bats like taunted them as being superior to them, and basically the PCs tricked them into thinking that there was a Batman leading a group of bats.
And that because of this thieving Batman, they should leave this area because the bats were too much of a problem.
Yep.
Yes. And
eventually the Crown Top Coup was worried about the Batman and having to fight the Batman and the monkeys and all those things, so they decided to find fresher pastures.
Mm-hmm.
So the PCs removed a nuisance from the area, which was good for them politically, and they got back the ring, which the monkeys said they could keep, and they could then recruit monkeys as some of their persona agents, which they actually did like as late as possible into the game, so it didn't help them as much as it could have.
But it was still funny.
They'd already plane shifted, but some of them had a few monkeys at that point. So by then, the election was going to happen soon, so they did the last few phases of the election. And just as with a lot of the votes and districts counted, Froggery was clearly in the lead. But before it could all finish off, the earth quaked, and suddenly a giant chasm opened up around the Hall of Final Deeds, and horrible blighted miasma started coming out of it, and it was not a good situation. So everyone rushed over. A bunch of the powerful spellcasters of the district were putting up a perimeter to prevent the miasma from spreading further. And they were supposed to wait for people from Central, which would take a while. But the PCs decided that they would go in.
You had to save iFault C.
To save iFault C.
Yeah.
And so they headed into the area where there were a whole bunch of yet more festering spirits. These were, I guess, reflavored to be like blighted quintessence, but like I was saying before, way too many festering spirits in this adventure path, as well as some slithering graves, which are basically ridiculously advanced slithering pits.
Yes.
And the PCs made it through there into the memorial nave, where they had to fight against a giant sludge as well as more of the blighted quintals, and they saved iFault C. And they made it down. They completely annihilated a Catobli Plus. I think that Eustace just disintegrated it in almost one hit after somebody did something small and then he disintegrated it. They headed down to submerged tunnels where Niv had been getting these telepathic communications from some kind of a being that wanted them to go kill the snake. But even though that happened, they still managed to sort of move around at just the right pace that they didn't run into the snake, who was a slime naga again, just like the one from before. But instead wound up running into the blight, who had been sending those telepathic messages, and so they got into a fight with that blight. They destroyed the blight, and the naga came in from behind with some froghemoths, which the PCs managed to definitely do weird positioning things to the froghemoths, where they were able to move, somehow push and shove the froghemoths around to not be able to attack people as much. And then they used this froghemoth's own tongue abilities to get where they pulled people in to get into flanking positions and managed to annihilate
That was
them.
A really interesting tactical combat. I forget exactly which ability we were using to push them around, but...
And they disintegrated the naga, so the enemy who had been removing memories was ready to remove memories from the naga, but that might not have worked. But didn't have to, because they disintegrated the naga.
Yes.
Who was actually one of the conspirators who of the people who kidnapped Taldaris, so could have been a liability. So at this point, the PCs had won the election. They gathered a ton of evidence. And so, and Phenolix and O'Holly had been working together in the sort of buddy cop situation of, like, one of them follows all the rules. The other one is super chaotic.
Yes.
And they would always, like, give presentations of what happened that were, like, Phenolix is like, thanks to our, our very careful analysis of all of these things. Thanks to all careful analysis of all these things, we figured this out. And O'Holly was like, "Your careful analysis only did that. My investigation is why we discovered these other things. Why are you minimizing the input?" And so they got into a lot of arguments, but they were all actually very effective. So
about whose contributions were more important,
and about whether or not being willing to be flexible and spontaneous was helpful, as opposed to being very, very methodical. Let's see.
Stump Monkey strongly approves of monkey agents for no particular reason.
I see. So they were eventually able to figure out that these were definitely Norgorgerites who had kidnapped our good friend Taldaris and must have taken him to Dustfathom, the local Norgorgerite area. So for those of you who are not deep into the cosmology, Norgorber is the god of thieves and assassins and poisoners and secrets, and is an ascended mortal. And just like how every city is built upon the undercities of other cities, well, most cities that aren't very, very new, of other older versions of the city, Axis has those lower levels as well, and those became Norgorber's home.
Even though Norgorber is an evil deity.
Yep, and so Dustfathom is the name of Norgorber's home. He's a neutral evil deity. He just lives in the underbelly of Axis. One of those areas of Dustfathom is called Lost Silhouette, which is the one that's underneath Sayashto, and that they'd had to deal with before. And the police that Fanas worked for knew that Lost Silhouette is a big pain, because usually if you go in there, they're alerted in advance to your squad because of corruption, and they will get out, possibly killing some of your people with a horrible, like, darkness appears, half of everyone is dead, and then when you go in, they've just evacuated with all their information from Lost Silhouette, and then the place rejiggers the next time so that you don't even have good information of what the layout is. So all of their raids had been unsuccessful with all of the police. But if the PCs sneak in, that might work. So they're able to get a lot of resources since Froggery was the Council of Gates. And they had so much evidence. So they came in with extra resources, and they decided to sneak into Lost Silhouette in order to basically save Taldaris. So the PCs went in, and they had their extra resources, and they had like this boat because they had to go through these sewers, and they saw that there were some Thanadaemons guarding a front door, and they knew the Thanadaemons had a certain range of true seeing, and they had up an invisibility sphere on themselves, and their boat was invisible too. They knew that the boat was not moving fast enough, so the Thanadaemons were going to see them and possibly set an alarm. So, using the vehicle rules from the Game Mastery Guide, the PCs sent their boat out of control at the maximum possible speed. It went careening into the dock. Though they had cast silence just in case, but also they managed to, just at the last minute, succeed at the check in the vehicle rules to stop it, like right before it hit, so it actually didn't make a really loud sound. But the main thing is, it went all the way up, and so in one motion during initiative, the PCs would come into the true seeing, the Thanadaemons saw them.
Yes.
And managed to get the silence up over the Thanadaemons by going faster than them with stealth, and beat the crap out of the Thanadaemons before they could do anything.
Because we're like, oh crap, how do we stop them from raising the alarm?
That's right.
Because in this place, like, it was hard to... A lot of concealment things may have some trouble. But then also, like, the precautions of this place mean that if you can stop people from running to the next room, there's, like... A lot of rooms are warded so that you can't really hear what's going on in the next room.
Trouble.
And divination things have trouble. So, like, we figured that if we can stop encounters from running off, then...
Norgorgerites love their secrets.
Yes.
So, yes, the sound is dampened hugely between rooms.
And also the manager of top quality restaurant Norburger, says Stump Monkey, Absalom's best kept secret.
Oh boy. So, they managed to kill those Thanadaemons. They got into the dungeon. And from there, the Pixies took a somewhat roundabout route, though they did immediately go fight the Axiomite Grave Knights that are directly visible from when you enter past the Thenodamons.
Mm-hmm.
And after taking down those Grave Knights, they managed to run into Wasilka the Fantabulous's petitioner, Wasilka the Failed, who they decided to rescue her because she'd been tortured by those Grave Knights, and in exchange for her information about the layout of the place.
Mm-hmm.
And so we
had to convince her to tell us stuff, but like she's sort of like, you've already screwed up. You should just leave here.
She wanted to make a deal. So she came in with the PCs. They went into a meeting room where actually my Grave Knights and a Bogeyman were talking with a Contract Devil, and they decided not to fight the Contract Devil. They fought the others. The Devil didn't fight back. Then the Devil tried to make a deal with them, which they eventually, I think, did not take.
Yeah. Some of us were considering it.
It was close. And she just was like, all right, and went back to hell. The PCs also found a bunch more petitioners in the Flesh Locker who they decided they did not want to release.
Mm-hmm. At least I think we were talking about going back to release them eventually, but we didn't want to release them.
Because they're all just neutral evil petitioners who had been sentenced to be here. They then went around without going to any of the alchemy rooms or the worm room where the worm that walks is, but instead they managed to go directly into D11 next, which was the room that has the Oblivion Lab, which is good because if they had retreated from the dungeon, this is where the dungeon keeps like this really corrupting tome that they would have gotten rid of immediately. If they had a chance, the inversions of pentonometry. And so the PCs defeated some heresites of Abadar that were dedicated to Norgorber. Heresites are an undead that like looks like a deity, but is dedicated to a different deity that is making fun of that deity, basically. So they looked like Abadars, but they were dedicated to Norgorber. And after defeating the heresites, the PCs got inversions of pentonometry. They managed to figure out that the inevitable that was there was bound temporarily and was partially corrupted. And so instead of sending a pandemic of corrupted information back, they managed to remove the corruption first, I believe.
Yeah, we did.
Before sending the inevitable back.
And we found the registry of the inevitables.
And they found the registry of infected inevitables to turn over to Lieutenant Finalix in there, too.
Yep.
At that point, the PCs, like, backtracked a whole bunch instead of continuing forward and managed to backtrack all the way back to a secret door that they had found in the room with Wasilka. And managed to come in from behind on Hamilkai, the fun Hyakume that Linda had realized was behind some of the memory erasure because of her work on a certain scenario.
Well, I do remember that one though because that I had realized that though because I was like, oh, I know what's going on, and then Mark was surprised that I knew about this random obscure monster, and I'm like,
yep.
What else is an eye imagery based memory erasing creature going to be?
It's an obscure monster from Bestiary 4.
It is an obscure monster from Bestiary 4.
So, you guys fought this Hyakume Spy Master, actually managed to get the drop on Hamilkai and take Hamilkai down. Then, continuing the coming from behind in that secret door, the PCs cleared out sort of the barracks area that was back there.
Yeah.
And, but then they headed through another secret door that took them directly into the prison where Taldaris was being imprisoned, as well as this horrible Yithian that turned out to be just somebody else who had been replaced by a Yithian. And that's where they found Thousand Names, who they had seen in the vision. Thousand Names was a corrupted petitioner who thought that covering up all of the text of being an Axis petitioner with the names of the slain would like transform Thousand Names into a more powerful type of creature. So they fought Thousand Names' group. Thousand Names is a Inquisitor of Norgorber too. And they rescued Taldaris. And Taldaris was then coming along with the PCs at that point in time.
Yep.
So they had already skirted like a whole bunch of things. They had done this all in one day, so that the enemies did not retreat with any evidence and then leave the place back up.
Go through the secret door. It's probably the way the enemies don't want you going.
And then at that point, the PCs went back to a different secret door they had found in the barracks, which led through a long hallway, through another secret door, and then into the sanctum of the Shadow Master of the area, who usually like finds the PCs and harries them and then retreats through walls and like warns everybody to go team up on the PCs, but the PCs had actually managed to avoid his notice by destroying all of the iconography that he could see through with his magical enter image ability in every room. And so that was pretty...
Now, remember we talked about, like, should we destroy the imagery? Is he going to notice immediately if we destroy it? And then we just, like, oh, he's probably not going to notice immediately that we destroyed it. But it just means that if he tries to go through it, he might just think it's malfunctioning.
Because he can see through all of them at the same time whenever he uses it. So they decided to go fight the Secret Shade. Secret Shade has a really interesting backstory because Secret Shade was a mortal rival of Norgorber. And therefore, once Norgorber became a deity, Secret Shade actually knows more Norgorber's mortal identity. And so, therefore, Norgorber took away all of Secret Shade's memory. And Secret Shade is now a servitor of Norgorber who has, like, a few, like, mementos of the past life and struggles with having no memory. And hungers for validation because they know that they had a rival that they could never defeat. And so Secret Shade is the mastermind who decided to kidnap Taldaris because Secret Shade was so amused by what was going on in the War for the Crown and thought that doing so would help, because then if Taldaris was kidnapped, Secret Shade could send fake information to the mantle that would just pick whoever Norgorber wanted as the ruler. So, that's cool. The PCs fought Secret Shade, and the Secret Shade then sort of retreated down through the ground into the lower area where there's just a lower floor to the dungeon. I think it's supposed to be possible for the Secret Shade to go there, but I think technically where it is located is not really directly down from that room, but I just decided it was since the PCs hadn't gone the other way where it would have led to that. And Eustace disintegrated the floor, and the PCs fell down into a room.
If you haven't yet caught on to the fact that Eustace loves the spell Disintegrate, Eustace loves the spell Disintegrate and uses it to great effect.
They came into a room where they wound up finding not only some corrupted Collier roots, not only the injured Secret Shade, not only a bunch of weird, like, special magic circles that were made to intercept sendings and then play them out so that the Norgorber people could learn other people's secrets. But also, they found the Stabbing Beast, the Herald of Norgorber, had come to hang out here. And so the PCs fought the Collier Roots, and they finished off the Secret Shade. They fought the Stabbing Beast, and since they used Spirit Blast on the Stabbing Beast, which, like, hits the spiritual essence back to the source, and this was a Herald of Norgorber, I told them that they basically, like, flicked Norgorber's nose a little bit, because Norgorber was the one who was the sole source of the Herald. And Herald's not a protected image. We gave Norgorber a paper cut. Yes, you gave Norgorber a little paper cut. And
which she immediately healed, but that's the principle of the thing.
That's right. And so then that's when one of the sending interceptors intercepted a sending that talked about that showed a masked figure saying how impatient an immortal can be, and that the assassination had been complete, basically in code. That the woman was dead, and that shall we kill the child as well? And they're like, no, do not kill the Twilight Child. And that's when the PCs realized, oh, Yeah, this is probably about Eutropia.
Yep.
And so they rushed back to the material plane where they discovered Eutropia had been assassinated.
No.
They did have Taldaris back, though, and they got Taldaris' blessing. So the PCs rushed back, but also there's a lot of fast pacing in the last adventure where the PCs are supposed to do a murder mystery investigation and immediately go to a dungeon and immediately do something else that involves the persona phase. But I want to be nice and let the PCs raise their persona ranks.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of slowballed the investigation to give some persona phases there because the PCs had leveled up and they needed some time to get up their persona. So during that time, Niv, who had just got the blessing of Taldaris, an inevitable, and also had some of the clockwork making dwarves who lived right next to Sayashto help make some lawful clockwork. He performed a alchemical experimentation with legendary crafting that was corruptive to his chaotic good nature. He fell from chaos for this and became neutral good because he infused himself with a magical heart, an alchemical heart made from Axis's essence. It was stabilized together with, basically, he collected all 4 of the essences using the heartstone, that the dead heartstone they took from the Night Hag, collecting astral essence from Taldaris. Then the blessing of the spiritual Taldaris, was a different fragment of Taldaris. Then the clockwork from there, using the circle ritual that he had found from the Aasimar that was supposed to turn them into full angels to help channel that energy into himself and his own heart. In addition to the infinite loop of spellcasting preparation that made the mouse immortal in the first part of the AP. And when he combined all of that together, he managed to replace his heart with a clockwork alchemical heart that was not only an exploit that made him immortal, but it was a lot more efficient than Nanarine's original blood-based research, because it was also blood-based, but it did not require transfusions from lab assistants. Mm-hmm. So he was then inducted as the 5th member of the Inner Circle of the Immaculate Circle. And so he joined up, and I told him that, to his surprise, Panavar Lothud the 6th was in there, but also there's some weird ooze guy who can change shapes, and also a Fey hunter guy. And he gained access to a ton of different common formulas, like pretty much all of them, and his own special awesome lab that had an extra item bonus on all alchemy that was in there to do his research. And the player couldn't come for a few times, so his character was just in his lab doing research. As we moved into part 6, where there was an investigation of Eutropia's murder. And so the PCs, shocking me because of the fact that, and I think this never would have happened in Pathfinder First Edition, but in Pathfinder Second Edition, it's really, really inexpensive to raise dead on something that's really low level. And this becomes relevant because previously, when I was talking to other people in the office about whether or not Eutropia's dog, Taldaris, who was killed in the assassination, would be canonically alive, I said, it is such a noble excess to raise dead on a dog instead of, spending that 5,450 gold pieces, feeding 10 villages for a year or something like that, or whatever it would have done. I can't believe that anyone would do that. And they're like, yeah, but, we talked to Crystal, and she assumes that most parties are going to raise the dog. I was like, but what party's going to raise the dog? But in my group was playing in Second Edition, where it cost almost nothing to raise the dog, because it was a dog. And they did.
Yeah.
So Second Edition retroactively makes the thing that people
The
wanted
players
to happen.
love dogs, says Dumb Monkey.
They do.
Also,
but it's just
PCs
like,
don't necessarily think with the same logic as like.
it's just such an example of the moral, or I mean not moral corruption, but like the noble corruption of Taldor, that the nobles would rather bring their pet dog back to life than
help
100 humans.
Yes.
Who were trapped in a cycle of poverty.
Yes.
And I guess it's not just players, Stunt Monkey, because really, if you're in a movie,
Yeah.
I've seen it where there's like thousands of people dying. Oh yeah, whatever. And then like a dog gets killed. It's like, oh no,
Yeah.
it's a dog.
Because anyway, yes.
So, anyway, the dog and Eutropia were both killed in this strange murder mystery where the PCs found lots of weird and seemingly bizarre evidence of Eutropia seemed to have been killed all in one hit, but it wasn't necessary. It was something that, like, scratched the edge of her heart and should have made her take a little while to bleed out. So, like, why didn't
she died in one hit? Yeah.
Why did she not fight back? And Taldagus gave some testimony as well of what had happened.
We also found something in Taldagus's like mouth or stomach.
In his stomach there was a key, a special magic key, and there was they questioned the lady in waiting to try to figure out what was going on, and they really couldn't make much sense of exactly what had happened because it didn't really make sense. They did all of the forensics. They figured out what happened, but it just didn't make sense.
Yes.
And so later, when they told like even a fraction of this evidence to Niv's player, Niv like within like a minute correctly deduced some information that they had spent hours and had not guessed, but that the AP doesn't necessarily assume that you do.
Yes.
But they had all of the evidence, and then it became time for the funeral. And so after the funeral, Carius offered the PCs all of the treasury of... He was just so upset. His sister was dead. All of the money that they had been storing to try to get her to take control of the crown because she's dead, to go get revenge and take down the ones who had killed her, and was able to remember some information that... led to a divination, which led to the PCs heading into the mountains to look for abandoned ghost towns, of all things. And they narrowed it down based on the clues to 5 different ghost towns.
We were also willed something by a necklace by Eutropia, which is very strange.
It was just a necklace. It was non-magical.
It was non-magical, but it was highly resistant to divinations.
That's correct.
It was weird.
Yep.
So we figured that Eutropia willing us just like this one random necklace.
And you knew that it wasn't just secretly magical and protecting from its magic because of the fact that people knew she got this non-magical, like, very not valuable, in money sense, trinket from her mother.
Yeah. So we figured it must have, like, some kind of psychic significance or something, and it was going to be important, so we should keep it with us.
Yep. So the PCs
try to figure
kept it along with Carla. And, so they decided not to take all the money, but they took most of it, like all of the extra magic items, and then like 2/3 or something of the actual coin, and used it to buy more magic items for themselves, and then headed off into the mountains to check the ghost towns until they found the right ghost town. And lo and behold, the right ghost town was the one they kind of might have suspected because it was owned by the Lothide family, and they were thinking that can't be a coincidence that one of these 5 ghost towns was. So they eventually discovered that, yes, this ghost town had been abandoned, but there were very, very well hidden tracks of people who'd been using it. And then they were attacked by 2 powerful Sakiels.
Which made us even more sure we were on the right track.
That's
because Sakiels are like a really weird thing that we'd only otherwise seen with the other incidences in County Marat.
But they found that the one of the buildings was actually so magically locked and prevented from even divinations or teleporting in that they would need a magical key to get inside. Fortunately, the PCs had a magical key to
So
get
we're
inside.
like, well, we found this key. Maybe it'll work because we're on the trail of this assassin.
And it took them inside. And they managed to go in, just barely miss a secret door that was hiding some enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And then go into a central atrium that connected to every other room in the building, at which point the enemies in that secret door came out to attack them from behind. The enemies in another room were going to attack them from the front, but the PCs opened that door as their first choice. They just like, well, there's 5 doors. This one.
Yeah.
And so Frogry wound up standing in the door, blocking half of the battle from getting to the other half, just by herself, because she's a shield fighter, fighting that half. Well, most of that half, because one of them was a Shadow Dancer.
Yeah, you can't just fight off a Shadow Dancer.
Shadow Dancer from the Advanced Player's Guide.
Yes.
So, however, they managed to maze the Shadow Dancer.
As I think we mentioned before, but just to be clear, we our group that we play with is all under NDAs and does a fair amount of
NDA playtesters. They were part of the Starfinder playtest too.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we didn't actually have it finished for the Advanced Player's Guide, but even so, I had some ideas of what was going to happen from the initial turnover of that. So, which I had not brought, but at that point in time, but we did do some Shadow Dancer fun.
In this comment, in PF2, it's much more difficult to be certain that items are not magical than it was in PF1.
That's true.
But we were pretty sure.
Just because it was a known actual item that was not magical.
Yeah.
So yeah, the fight actually took longer than I expected. The Mooks managed to hold their own somewhat. I mean, they weren't really winning, but they were doing some things. They were surviving, even though the Shadow Dancer got mazed and then super killed and disintegrated by the PCs.
Yep.
Eventually, the fight ended, and the PCs searched the entire area and eventually discovered one of the bookcases had like a super hidden illusion that led to a staircase leading down. And so, now that they had killed Rien, who was a Shadow Dancer who wanted to be the 5th member of the Inner Circle of the Immaculate Circle.
That was one of the people that we were fighting in this
That
giant
was
pile-up.
the leader of that group.
Yes.
Who was also the assassin who had killed Eutropia. Well, also, Rien hated Niv for becoming the 5th member of the Immaculate Circle.
But we didn't know any of this about Niv. Niv wasn't there.
That's true. Niv wasn't there. So they went down into the lower floors where they immediately found some of those lab assistants of Nanary and Adela, who are these elves that, like, have claws and, like, red eyes, and they look like they might be, like...
Vampires
or dragon bloodline sorcerers or some kind of weird thing.
But we attacked them.
And the PCs attacked them, and they got all tangled up in the silks, and they managed to slow to them with some kind of weird effect. And they opened the door, leading to a ridiculously circuitous hallway that eventually ends in a fake door that is just trapped. And every door is trapped with a horrific trap.
Yes.
And they're all secret, except for the fake door at the end. But the PCs managed to find the second secret door, which led into a battle with a Soglov. And then it led into a room with a 3-eyed seer, who, when the whole complex had been put into lockdown with all the doors locked and trapped by the PCs entering it and triggering the alarms, I decided that Niv was there with the 3-eyed seer. Also, since we were about to end the session and Niv's player could come next time, so I was like, you see the 3-eyed seer is in there, or you see this purple bee woman, and she's talking to Niv, who's also here.
And we're like, Niv, what the hell are you doing here?
And his player wasn't there, so we stopped the session.
Yes.
And then the next session started with them saying, Niv, what the hell are you doing here? And then Niv said to them, what are you doing here?
Shall we break this episode here?
Yes. That's a good place for us to stop our episode as well.
Yes.
Yes. With the PCs being like, what are you doing here, Niv? And Niv saying, what are you guys doing here? This is my lab. They're like, this is where Eutropia's assassin was.
Were you working for Eutropia's assassins all along? Yeah, it continued from there.
Let's see, there's a link.
Spider-Man pointing GIF.
Yes. Alright.
It didn't work.
It's not a real link. Okay. Oh, you're welcome, Real Unicorn. And it gets even more bizarre
and
wacky starting at this point. Which we will continue in the next time. And we also have done a little bit of post-game since then, so I can tell you a little bit about the post-game as well. If we manage to finish all of part 6. Bye, YouTube. See you next time.
Bye.